My wife and her friend. What I saw destroyed our marriage. I thought nothing could ever ruin our perfect marriage. But everything changed in an instant. One evening, I came home earlier than expected, and what I saw in our bedroom made me question everything about my life. I couldn't have imagined that the people I loved and trusted the most were capable of something like this. It was a moment I'll never forget. This story is about trust, betrayal, and how a single event can change your life forever. So, get comfortable because you're in for an emotional roller coaster. Sometimes life feels so perfect that you fail to notice the little things hiding in the shadows. Emily and I had everything. A happy marriage, trust, dreams of a bright future. We built this perfect world together, and I believed nothing could destroy it. But one day, I realized how wrong I was. Coming home early, I saw something I could never have imagined in my worst nightmares. As I opened the door to our bedroom, I heard soft laughter. Her laughter and another, very familiar one. I walked in and froze. What I saw changed everything. Sarah, her best friend, someone I trusted as much as my own wife. They were together. But it wasn't just friendly interaction. Their closeness, their looks, it was unmistakable. I stood there, my mind racing. How long had this been going on? How had I missed it? Was my whole life a lie? I stood in the doorway, unable to believe my eyes. My heart felt like it was in a vice. Right in front of me were the two people closest to me, my wife Emily and her best friend Sarah. They were together, in the most intimate situation I could have imagined. Rage consumed me from head to toe. Emotions surged through me with no outlet. And then, I couldn't hold it in anymore. What the hell is going on here? My voice shattered the silence in the room. Emily pulled away from Sarah abruptly, as if that could change anything. Her face turned pale, and tears immediately welled up in her eyes. "It's not what you think," she stammered, trembling. Sarah stayed silent. Her face was calm, but her eyes betrayed fear. She quickly got up from the bed and started gathering her things without even looking at me. "Wait," I called after her. "Where are you going? What were you doing here?" "I should leave," she said shortly, still avoiding my gaze. She left the room, and I was left alone with my wife. How long has this been going on? I could barely get the words out, my fists clenched. Emily was crying. She sat on the edge of the bed, covering her face with her hands. I don't know what to say," her voice shook. "It was a mistake." "A mistake? You accidentally ended up in the same bed? Tell me, Emily, how did this happen?" She lifted her head and met my eyes. "It started a few months ago. I didn't plan for this to happen. I love you. But what? Sarah? Your best friend? Do you even realize how this looks to me? I didn't want you to find out like this. It happened when I was feeling lonely, when you were always busy. She was there for me, and it just happened." I stared at her, 1,000 questions swirling in my head. How did I not see this earlier? Why didn't she come to me? Standing in our bedroom, unable to believe what I was seeing, I felt as if the walls that once witnessed our happiness were now closing in, suffocating me with anger and despair. The air felt heavy, and every second I spent there became unbearable. "I can't stay here," I suddenly said, feeling the emotions take over. Emily looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. "Please don't go. We can fix this. I know I made a mistake, but—" Her voice was barely audible. I cut her off sharply. "Fix this? How are you planning to fix the fact that you betrayed me with your own friend? How can I ever trust you again?" She sobbed, covering her face with her hands. But I didn't care. I couldn't listen anymore. "I need to leave," I repeated. I walked out of the room, and she didn't try to stop me. Heading to the living room, I grabbed my car keys and the bag sitting by the door. I didn't even know where I was going, but the one thing I knew for certain was that I couldn't stay there. I slammed the front door behind me so hard it almost came off its hinges. Sitting in the car, I stared at the steering wheel for a few minutes, unsure of what to do. My heart was pounding, and her words kept echoing in my head. It was a mistake. I started the engine and drove, aimlessly. I had no plan. The only thing I wanted was to escape the place now filled with nothing but pain and betrayal. About half an hour later, I spotted a roadside motel. It looked run down, but I didn't care. I just needed a place to be alone. At the reception desk, I could barely speak. The woman behind the counter handed me a key without even asking if I was okay. I guess my face said more than I ever could. When I entered the room, I threw my bag on the floor and collapsed onto the bed. My mind was blank, yet every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. My fists clenched as I remembered the way Emily had looked at me, trying to justify herself. The tears on her face. Were they because of the pain she'd caused me, or because she was afraid of being caught? I ripped off my jacket and tossed it onto a chair. Questions spun in my mind. How long had this been going on? Did she ever truly love me? And if she did, how could she do this to me? The next morning, I woke to the sunlight streaming through the grimy curtains. My body felt heavy, and my thoughts were shattered. I decided to find a nearby coffee shop to clear my head. Sitting at a small table, staring at a steaming cup of coffee, I watched people laughing and chatting around me, as if nothing bad could ever happen in their lives. I felt completely disconnected from reality. Suddenly, my phone buzzed on the table. A message from Emily. Please, give me a chance to explain. I don't want this to be the end of us. I stared at the screen, unsure of what to reply. My heart was torn between anger and a desperate need to understand why this had happened. The night at the motel felt endless. My thoughts oscillated between rage and sorrow. Every time I closed my eyes, images of Emily and Sarah together came flooding back. Their smiles, their glances, their words. I felt like I'd been betrayed in the worst possible way. At dawn, I made a decision. I needed to go back home. I couldn't stay away without getting answers. I needed to hear the truth from Emily, no matter how much it hurt. The drive back was excruciating. Every mile felt longer than the last. I rehearsed what I'd say to her, but none of the words seemed right. What if she lies again? What if she doesn't even regret what she did? These questions gnawed at me. As I pulled up to our house, I saw the lights on inside. She hadn't slept. I parked the car and sat there for a few minutes, staring at the door. It had once been a symbol of our shared life, our home. Now it felt like a barrier between trust and betrayal. I walked into the house, and the first thing I heard was silence. She was sitting in the kitchen, a cup of tea in her hands. Her eyes were red, her face exhausted. She looked up when she saw me but didn't say a word. "We need to talk," I said flatly, trying to keep my emotions in check. Emily nodded, silently gesturing for me to sit across from her. "How are you?" she asked in a quiet voice. I laughed, but it was bitter and short. "How am I? Really? You actually want to know how I'm doing? After what happened?" I looked her straight in the eyes. She shrugged slightly, and tears started streaming down her face again. "I know what I've done," she whispered. "Then explain. I want to know everything. Why? How long? What does this mean to you?" Emily was silent for a few seconds, then took a deep breath. "I don't know how to explain it. It started. I don't even remember when. At first, it was just conversations. Sarah was always there when I started feeling like something was wrong between us." "Wrong between us?" I raised my voice, not understanding where she was going with this. "You were busy. Always busy. Work, errands, plans." At some point, I started feeling lonely. Sarah was the only one who noticed that something was wrong with me. She supported me, and it just happened. Her voice was barely audible. "It just happened? That's your version?" I struggled to keep myself from yelling. "You cheated on me with her, and it just happened?" I didn't want this. I didn't plan it. But the more we talked, the closer we got. And I lost control. I sat there, listening, trying to figure out if there was even a shred of truth in her words. "How long has this been going on?" I asked after a long pause. "A few months," she admitted. "A few months?" I felt the anger rising in me again. "And all this time you lived with me, pretending everything was fine?" I didn't know how to stop it. I thought I could handle it on my own. But what? You decided to keep going because it was convenient? Because you liked hiding it from me? Emily broke down, crying harder. "I know I ruined everything, but I want to fix it. I love you. If you love me, then why did this happen? Why didn't you come to me when you felt something was wrong?" "I was afraid you wouldn't understand." And I'm supposed to understand this? I raised my hand, gesturing at us. This is supposed to be okay for me? I stood up, trying to gather my thoughts. Listen, I don't know if I can forgive you, I said, looking at her. But if you even want me to try, then Sarah is never to be a part of our lives again. No calls, no meetings, she's gone. Completely and forever. Emily lifted her head, her eyes wide. But she... No, but... I cut her off. Either you end all contact with her, or there's no us anymore. She was silent for a few seconds, then slowly nodded. Okay, she said. I'll do it. After our conversation, Emily promised not to talk to Sarah anymore. She said it convincingly, with tears in her eyes, and I wanted to believe she truly regretted what she'd done. I saw fear and pain in her gaze, and maybe that was the only thing keeping me from leaving. But the trust, it was shattered. Every time Emily picked up her phone or left the house, I found myself questioning her actions. It was exhausting. I'm going to the store, she said one day, grabbing her purse. Okay, I replied, but inside, something felt tight. I watched the clock after she left. 30 minutes. An hour and a half. When she finally came back, I asked why it had taken so long. There was a long line, she said, and I couldn't tell if she was lying or not. When I opened the browser, I noticed a tab someone had forgotten to close. It was a social media account. I froze as I saw a chat between Emily and Sarah. I miss you so much. I don't know how much longer I can keep this a secret. I miss you too. Find a way for us to meet. He'll never find out. My hands started trembling. I read a few more messages, each one confirming that their relationship hadn't ended. They were still seeing each other, lying to my face and assuming I would never find out. When Emily came home, I was sitting in the living room, holding my phone with a screenshot of their conversation open. We need to talk, I said coldly. Emily froze in the doorway, realizing something was wrong. What happened? Do you really want to ask that? I showed her the phone. Her face went pale. It's not what you think. You've said that before. But you know what? I don't believe your words anymore. She tried to say something, but I stopped her. How much longer were you planning to lie? Did you really think I wouldn't notice? I just didn't know how to end it. Sarah, she's been an important part of my life. And me? What am I to you? Just a convenient option? The argument went on for hours. But I already knew our marriage was over. I couldn't live with someone who had so easily shattered my trust. The next morning, I packed my things. I'm filing for divorce, I told her. I can't live in this world of lies. Emily cried, begged me to stay, promised to fix everything, but I couldn't listen anymore. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. I walked out of the house, leaving nothing behind but silence. Emily tried to contact me several times, but I ignored her calls and messages. I thought it was the end, but it turned out to be just the beginning. One day, I received a message from a mutual acquaintance who had seen Emily and Sarah together. They were sitting at a cafe, holding hands, looking as if nothing had happened. My heart sank. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. Then, Sarah showed up at the door of my new apartment. I need to talk to you, she said. I wanted to slam the door in her face, but something stopped me. You've done enough, Sarah. What more do you want? You don't understand, she replied, stepping into the room. Emily still loves you, but she also loves me. This is your justification? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I don't want to lose you, and I don't want to lose her either, she said. But if you want, I can leave. I stared at her, trying to figure out if she actually believed the words coming out of her mouth. I had a visit from Sarah, I told her. Emily lowered her eyes. She said she loves both me and you. Is that true? I asked. Emily was silent for a long time before finally responding. I don't know how to explain it. Everything feels so confusing. If you can't make a choice, I'll make it for you, I said firmly. I stood up and left, this time for good. There was no longer any room in my life for lies, betrayal, and manipulation. Emily had made her choice, and now I was making mine. I stared at the pen lying in front of me and finally signed the papers. Is that it? I asked the lawyer. Yes, she replied. You're officially free now. Free. The word felt strange, but I knew I had to start a new life. I rented a new apartment in a different neighborhood, bought new clothes, and even signed up for a gym membership. It felt like a rebirth. To distract myself, I enrolled in photography classes, something I had always dreamed of trying. The world had so much to offer, things I'd overlooked while being consumed by work and my relationship. The first few weeks were tough. Sometimes I caught myself wanting to text Emily, or even see her just to ask, "Are you happy?" But I resisted. I had promised myself not to go back. "I'm sorry for everything. Can we meet and talk?" I didn't reply. Emily called too, leaving voicemails. One of them said, "I know this sounds crazy, but I can't live without you. You've always been everything to me. I made a mistake. Please give me another chance." Every time I heard her voice, conflicting emotions filled me. Part of me wanted to respond, but the other part knew it would only drag me back into the pain. She was sitting on a bench, staring at her phone. My first instinct was to turn around and leave, but she looked up and saw me. "Hi," she said, standing up. I nodded, stopping a few feet away from her. "How are you?" she asked. "Good," I replied briefly. Silence fell between us. "You look different," she said, studying me closely. "Happier." "I am happier," I said, and it was true. Emily lowered her gaze, and I noticed her hands trembling. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I truly am." "I know," I said calmly, "but it doesn't change anything." I walked away, leaving her there in the park. For the first time, I felt like I had truly let her go. My life began to find a new rhythm. I was building my world from scratch. Photography classes, new acquaintances, quiet evenings with books or movies. All of it became my new normal. I thought less and less about Emily. But one day, I received an unexpected package. A courier dropped it off. There was no return address, but I knew who it was from. Emily. Inside the box was a flash drive and a short note. "Please watch this. It's important for me that you understand." I sat with the flash drive in my hands for a long time, debating whether to watch it. Finally, I plugged it into my laptop. Emily appeared on the screen, sitting in a room I knew all too well, our old bedroom. She was wearing the blouse I had given her for our first Christmas together. "Hi," she began, looking directly at the camera. Her voice was quiet, and her eyes looked exhausted. "I don't know if you'll even watch this, but I have to say everything I'm feeling." She paused for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts. "I know I made a mistake. I know I hurt you. But you have to understand that it all happened because I was weak. You were everything to me. You were the one who made me feel safe, loved, and calm. But sometimes, it just didn't feel like enough." Emily began reminiscing about our happy moments. How we first met, our trip to the mountains where we laughed in the rain, our first anniversary at a little Italian restaurant. "You were my world, but I destroyed it. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I know I don't deserve that. But I want you to know, I always loved you, and I always will." I watched the screen, feeling something heavy rise in my chest. But this time, it wasn't anger or pain. It was something else. When the video ended, I sat in silence for several minutes. Her words were emotional and genuine, but for some reason, they no longer affected me. It was in that moment I realized I had never truly loved her. Maybe I thought it was back then, but now, with time and clarity, the truth was undeniable. Our relationship wasn't built on true emotion. It was attachment, mutual convenience. I loved the idea of us, but not Emily herself. The realization hit me like a bolt of lightning. She had often asked me to show more emotion, to be more present, saying I was cold and distant. And now, I finally understood. She was right. I decided to write her a message, just to close the chapter once and for all. "Emily, I got your video. I'm sorry, but I can't give you what you want. We were together, but I've realized I never truly loved you. It was attachment and nothing more." A few minutes later, she replied, "You've hurt me, but at least now I know the truth. Don't ever write to me again." That was the last message I ever received from her. Her words, "Don't ever write to me again," sounded final, and I felt a heavy weight lift off my shoulders. But instead of relief, I was filled with an odd emptiness. I sat in my apartment, staring out the window, questioning myself. Why did I even agree to this marriage? Was it love? Or something else? Eventually, the realization struck me like thunder. I never loved Emily. It wasn't love. It was attachment, comfort, habit, maybe even fear of being alone. We met in college at an evening event. She was vibrant and full of life, and something inside me clicked. She's the one. But was it love? The first few months of our relationship were like a fairy tale. We went on adventures, laughed, and explored new places together. But as I replayed those memories, I realized it was all surface level. We were both playing roles we had created for ourselves. Emily wanted to be the perfect wife. I wanted to be the perfect husband. But we were never real with each other. One evening, as I returned home from my photography class, I saw a familiar car parked near my building. It was Jane's, Emily's mother. She stepped out of the car when she saw me and waved. "Hi," she said, a little awkwardly. "I know this might be inappropriate, but I wanted to talk to you." "Of course," I replied. We went to a nearby cafe. Jane looked tired, but her eyes radiated warmth. "I don't know all the details of what happened between you and Emily," she began. "But I want you to know, I've always appreciated you." Her words were unexpected but comforting. We talked about the past, my relationship with Emily, and how things had gone wrong. After that meeting, Jane and I started communicating more often. She would occasionally send me messages, asking how I was doing. I didn't see anything strange about it. She had always been kind and friendly. One day, she suggested we meet for dinner. "I know this might seem odd," she said with a smile, "but you were part of our family for so many years. I don't want to lose that friendship." We met at a cozy restaurant downtown. Jane was genuine, intelligent, and had a great sense of humor. I noticed how easy it was to be around her. There was no pressure, no hidden expectations. Time passed, and our conversations grew deeper. Jane shared her thoughts, stories from her past, her dreams, and her disappointments. She was nothing like Emily. One evening, as we walked through the park together, she stopped and looked at me. "You know," she said softly, "I've always seen something special in you. You deserve to be happy." I didn't respond, but her words stayed with me. News of my connection with Jane quickly reached Emily. One evening, I got a call from her. "Are you seriously dating my mother?" she yelled, her voice full of outrage. "That's none of your business," I replied calmly. "How could you? You didn't just ruin our marriage, now you're ruining my family." I hung up, unwilling to continue the conversation. Jane was different. Her maturity, wisdom, and calmness showed me that relationships could be genuine and honest. We grew closer. One day, she said, "I know this might seem wrong from society's perspective, but I can't deny my feelings for you." I took her hand and replied, "Neither can I." This new romance was unexpected, yet it felt natural. Jane gave me something I never experienced with Emily, true acceptance and understanding. Emily was now just a part of my past. Jane had become my future. And though it wasn't easy for anyone, I finally felt like I was finding myself. Our meetings became more frequent. At first, they were casual conversations about the past, shared memories, and what had happened between me and her daughter. But over time, the topic shifted. We began talking about our fears, our dreams, and what truly mattered to us. Jane was an incredible conversationalist. Her wisdom and composure were unlike anything I had seen in Emily. Her voice was always calm, her words precise. She never tried to justify her daughter's actions. Instead, she often said, "I can't imagine how hard it must have been for you." One evening, we were sharing a bottle of wine on her terrace. "You know, you deserve so much more than what Emily gave you," she said, looking directly into my eyes. "Maybe," I replied, "but sometimes I think it was my fault." She leaned closer and placed her hand on mine. "No, you were just someone who wanted to love." But she wasn't ready to accept it. I felt the warmth of her hand seep through my skin. It was strange yet completely natural. I looked up, and our eyes met. The moment lingered. Then she smiled softly. "I should head to bed," she said, rising slowly. "This was lovely as always." I stayed on the terrace, reflecting on what had just happened. After that night, our meetings carried a new undertone. Every glance, Every touch of her hand held a spark. We both knew it wasn't right, but we couldn't deny the pull between us. One evening, when I arrived for dinner, she greeted me in a sleek, fitted dress. Her figure had always been striking, but this time, I couldn't take my eyes off her. "You look amazing tonight," I said, trying to keep my composure. "Thank you," she replied with a playful smile. Dinner was cozy, and we talked as usual. But this time, as I was about to leave, she stopped me by the door. "Would you like to stay for coffee?" Her voice was quiet but confident. I hesitated for only a moment before answering, "Of course." She placed her hand on my knee, and that was the moment everything changed. I leaned in closer and asked, "Are you sure about this?" Without breaking eye contact, she replied, "I've wanted this since the day we started talking." I gently ran my hand along her cheek, and then our lips met. It was a tender but confident kiss, filled with the emotions we had been holding back for so long. We stayed there, holding each other, as the night enveloped us. It felt as though time had stopped. Her touch was soft, her movements assured. She knew what she wanted, and she made it clear that this was about more than physical closeness. It was something deeper. All thoughts of Emily faded away. In Jane, I found something I had never experienced in my previous relationship: true understanding, acceptance, and sincerity. We stayed together until morning. As the first rays of sunlight streamed through the windows, I realized this wasn't just a moment of weakness. It was something I had been longing for. Of course, we both knew this would spark a scandal. Emily found out about our relationship a few weeks later. She called me, yelling and accusing. "You've always been self-centered, Emily," I said during one of her calls. "Jane has shown me what a real relationship feels like." Her outrage only grew, but it no longer concerned me. My relationship with Jane was unexpected, but it was real. She helped me understand what I truly wanted in life and restored my faith in love. Sometimes life offers the most unexpected gifts, and I realized that it takes courage to accept them. A few months into our peaceful and happy life together, the thing I feared most happened. Emily found out. It wasn't a big surprise. Our shared social circle had enough people who thrived on gossip. But I hadn't expected her reaction to be so aggressive. One morning, I received a message from Emily. "Do you even realize how this looks? You're not just betraying me. You're destroying our family. If you don't end this, I'll make you regret it." I put my phone down, feeling a wave of anger. Her threats didn't scare me, but they meant one thing. Our period of calm was over. The next few days turned into chaos. Emily told our mutual friends about our relationship. Her words were twisted, and the story was exaggerated. "He's using my mother to get back at me. This is disgusting. He's manipulating her, and she doesn't even realize it." Rumors spread, and even people who had never interfered in our lives began discussing our relationship. Jane, usually calm and composed, started to feel the pressure. Her friends and colleagues began asking awkward questions. "They look at me like I've done something horrible," she admitted one evening. "You haven't done anything wrong," I reassured her. "This is our life, and we have the right to be happy." But it's not that simple. Emily won't stop until she tears us apart. We both knew she was right. Emily was stubborn and had always gotten her way. Emily started acting even more drastically. One day, she called Jane and unleashed her anger. "How could you?" she screamed into the phone. "You're my mother. You were supposed to support me, not betray me." "Emily, you don't understand. This isn't about you. It's about us," Jane replied, trying to remain calm. "About you too? It's disgusting. You're both disgusting." Jane hung up, but I could see how much the conversation had affected her. "She hates me," Jane said, shaking her head. "Let her hate you," I replied. "Her opinion doesn't matter anymore." She stated that she was prepared to take legal action if Jane and I didn't end our relationship. "She thinks she can still control our lives even after the divorce," I said, reading the document. "What does this mean for us?" Jane asked, a hint of concern in her voice. "It means she's trying to intimidate us. But I'm not giving in." We decided to consult a lawyer to discuss our options. He assured us that Emily had no legal grounds to interfere in our lives. Despite the challenges, we resolved not to let her destroy what we had built. Jane had become not only my partner, but also a steadfast friend who stood by me through the hardest times. One evening, as we sat together at home, Jane said, "You know, I never thought I'd find someone at this stage of my life who could make me feel alive again." "I feel the same," I replied, "and I won't let anyone take that from us." It all started with a call. One evening, after I returned home from work, the phone rang. Jane answered, and I immediately sensed the tension in her voice. "Hi, John," she said, her tone strained. John, Emily's father, was a stern, straightforward man who didn't tolerate things going off course. He had never interfered in my life with Emily, but now everything had changed. The call was brief, but I could see Jane growing pale as it progressed. When she hung up, her hands were trembling. "What happened?" I asked. "John knows about us." Emily told him everything. "And what did he say?" "He wants to meet with me. He thinks this is insane and says I need to end our relationship." The next day, Jane agreed to meet with John. She wanted to handle the situation peacefully, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. "I need to go alone," she said when we discussed the meeting. "If he starts pressuring you, call me," I replied. When she came home afterward, I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. "How did it go?" "It was difficult. He yelled at me. He said I was disgracing our family, ruining Emily's life." "And what did you say?" "I told him that you make me happy, that for the first time in years, I feel alive." I pulled her into an embrace, and we sat in silence for a long time. But I knew this wasn't the end. A few days later, my phone rang unexpectedly. It was John. "We need to talk," he said. We met in John's office. As always, he was impeccably dressed, radiating confidence, but his eyes betrayed his anger. "Listen," he began, sitting down at his desk. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but you need to end this." "I'm not doing anything," I replied calmly. "Jane and I are together because we love each other." "Love?" he scoffed, his laugh bitter rather than amused. "That's absurd. She's years older than you. It's not normal." "Age doesn't matter when there are real feelings," I countered. His face turned red. "If you don't stop this, I'll do everything in my power to ruin your life. I have influence, and you know it." I stood up and looked him directly in the eye. "You can do whatever you want, but I won't leave Jane." After that meeting, John started spreading rumors about Jane and me within our social circles. People began avoiding us, and some even stopped greeting us on the street. Jane often came home upset. "They look at me like I've betrayed them," she said. "Even my closest friends don't want to talk to me anymore." "We'll get through this together," I assured her. Their opinions don't matter. But I could see how much it hurt her. Despite everything, Jane remained strong. She showed me that true love doesn't back down in the face of challenges. One evening, as we sat at home, she said, "You know, I could walk away from all of this, go back to the life where everyone accepted me. But I don't want that. You've given me something I never had before, and I won't let anyone take that away from us," I replied. One day, Emily came to our house, furious. "How could you?" she shouted when I opened the door. "You've destroyed everything." "Emily, you made your choices," I said. "Now I'm making mine." "This isn't your choice. It's manipulation. She's ruining me." "No one is ruining you except yourself." Jane came to the door and spoke calmly. "Emily, you need to accept this. We're together, and that's not going to change." Emily looked devastated. She turned and left without another word. Months passed after John and Emily found out about our relationship. It was a difficult period filled with conflicts, accusations, and emotions. But time has a way of healing wounds, and even the most persistent battles lose their intensity. Jane and I continued building our life together. We learned to ignore the gossip and prejudice. Each challenge we overcame reminded us why we were together. One morning, while we were having breakfast, Jane received an unexpected call. It was Emily. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was quiet. "Can we meet?" Jane gave me a surprised look but nodded. "Of course. When and where?" We arranged to meet at a small cafe downtown. Emily arrived alone, looking nervous but determined. "Mom, I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, sitting down at the table. "I know I've behaved poorly. I was angry, hurt, but I don't want to lose you. Jane reached across the table and touched her hand. Emily, you'll always be my daughter. But I also have the right to be happy. Emily looked down, then nodded slowly. I understand that now, she said. I don't know if I can ever fully accept this, but I don't want to keep fighting. I just want you to be part of my life. Jane smiled softly. And I want to be part of yours. I understand. And if you're truly happy with him, I have no right to stand in your way. Those words marked the beginning of a long journey toward reconciliation. John was a tougher person to reach. He refused to even acknowledge us for a long time. But one day, I decided to take the first step. I need to talk to you, I said when I called him. There's nothing for us to talk about, he replied curtly. There is. We both want Jane to be happy. He sighed but eventually agreed to meet. We sat across from each other in his office. John looked tense but listened intently. I know it's hard for you to accept this, I said, but I want you to know that I love Jane, and I will do everything I can to make her happy. He was silent for a long time before finally saying, If you ever make her unhappy, I'll be the first to come after you. It wasn't an endorsement, but it was something. After months of tension, we decided to have a family dinner together. It wasn't easy, but it was an important step forward. Jane prepared John and Emily's favorite dishes, working hard to create a warm atmosphere. I helped her, and we were both a little nervous. When everyone gathered around the table, the air was thick with tension. But gradually, the conversation began to flow. John talked about his business, Emily shared updates about her new job, and Jane smiled as she watched her family slowly reconnect. I want to say something, Emily said suddenly. I can see that you're happy together, and that's what matters most. Her words felt like a symbolic end to the conflict. Our family relationships never returned to what they had been before, but they became better. We learned to listen to one another and accept differences, even when we didn't always agree. Jane and I continued to build our life together. We moved to a new city, started a small business, and began living the life we'd always dreamed of. This journey was filled with challenges, conflicts, and deep emotions. But in the end, we found what we were looking for, true happiness and harmony. What do you think of this story? Do you believe that true love is worth fighting for, even if it causes conflicts with loved ones? Share your thoughts in the comments below.